Hello and welcome to the Help Is Here podcast brought to you by the Beyond Compulsion Academy. Today I'm going to be talking about how to deal with the shame of escalated sexual compulsive behaviour. So working with clients from all over the world on solving this problem, what I hear is that a lot of guys do struggle with the shame component. Maybe what's happened is their use of porn has really escalated. They've looked at some sexual content that doesn't really align with who they view themselves as. It doesn't really align with their real sexual taste. It doesn't align with their values. What I've also seen is guys whose behavior has escalated to the point where they are acting out in real life, beyond porn, beyond the screen, where they are engaging in compulsive sexual behaviors, often influenced by porn with real people. And so what can then happen is people can feel like, oh my gosh, how have I ended up there? Like, why did I do that? And they can feel really, really bad about those behaviors. And I want to talk about this because I remember a few years back, before I learned the Beyond Compulsion method, I went on a bit of a mission to deal with my own feelings of shame around this problem. I once felt like I couldn't really talk to people about this. I once felt like there was something wrong with me. I once felt like a bit disgusting, to tell you the truth. Felt like, wow, how have I ended up looking at that kind of stuff? How have I done this? How have I done that? And, it was quite a bad place, right, to be. So I got into the work of Brené Brown. You may have heard of her. She's kind of an expert on shame. She's done a lot of research into it. And, that work, it kind of helped me a little bit. I then listened to a lot of a woman called Sarah Brewer. You may, again, have heard of her. She's got a very popular podcast. And I listened to over 100 of her episodes. And you know what? It helped, again, with the shame side a little bit. And I was like, okay, I feel a little bit better about this. Got a bit more comfortable talking about it. However, the porn addiction still existed. And what would happen is I would still continue to relapse and I'd still feel a lot of shame after every relapse. And I'm going to say something which may not go down too well with some people, but I honestly don't think the shame of engaging in a behavior that does not align with your values can go away entirely. I think that shame of doing something that doesn't feel right to you is always going to come up for as long as you continue to engage in that behavior. So let's say you went all in on shame, like I once did before I learned this method, and you just went 100% all in on, like, I'm going to work on this shame side. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to be very open. I'm going to tell my family. I'm going to tell my partner. I'm going to tell my friends. I'm just going to focus on shame. And the misconception is you're going to do that. You're going to overcome the shame, and then you're going to stop having the desires. But I feel like I kind of went down that route to some extent myself. I had a podcast talking about porn addiction before I learned the Beyond Compulsion method, and I would talk about it openly. But each relapse, I'd still feel that shame because I'm doing something that still just didn't feel right. It felt wrong to me, and no matter how hard I tried to stop it, I felt wrong for engaging in that behavior. And what I learned from all this expert sort of research on shame is that a big difference between shame and guilt is shame is kind of, there's something wrong with me, like down to the core, innate, inherently wrong with my sexual desires perhaps. Whereas guilt is more, oh, I did something wrong. That behavior was bad. That compulsive behavior, that relapse, that was something wrong that I did. And that's kind of the difference. But to be honest with you, shame, guilt, whatever you call it, you know what, if you do something which you just know in your mind, that isn't okay with me, really. When I'm thinking about it rationally, I find it hard to imagine a world where you aren't feeling shame after it, no matter how much work you do on it, okay? No matter what you tell yourself. However, here's the thing. I'm not here to just hate on people trying to work on the shame stuff. I honestly do think it's good to talk about this issue. I think it's good to be open about it. I think it's actually very powerful and effective to talk about maybe what you sort of looked at in the past, maybe what behaviors you've engaged in to kind of get it off your chest. But what I don't think it's effective with is solving the actual issue of the porn addiction. And I just want to tell you, from my experience, what I believe is honestly the best way to overcome feelings of shame. from all the research and, trying my best to work on this and talking about it openly, literally running a podcast and a YouTube channel, talking about this problem when I was still in the porn addiction, because this is how it all started for me, is I was still opening up, sharing about relapses when I was still struggling with the porn. I was doing that to the whole world, telling my friends, telling family, whatever. I was doing that. So I'd tried my best to work on the shame. But here's the thing. I honestly think the best way to overcome feelings of shame is you just put distance between those behaviors and like what you do now. Like, you just put time. I think time is just the best healer for this, right? Like, if you stop this behavior, like you stop engaging in compulsive behavior completely, and you go a long time of repeatedly dealing with the addictive part of the mind, so like completing the sort of process of dealing with the urges over and over and over, and you put time between yourself and the last time you relapsed, like that shame's gonna go, because you're no longer doing the thing that causes you shame. Like, I know it sounds stupidly obvious, but I just think that is the way forward. Like, I think, let's say just imagine a world where you have completely stopped engaging in all compulsive behaviors. You haven't done this for like 2 years. Like, how much less shame are you going to feel about, oh yeah, 2 years ago, I did this thing. Back then, maybe you didn't understand the problem. Maybe you didn't know how to deal with those desires. But like 2 years ago, I did this thing. It's like, okay, you're probably not going to feel anywhere near as much shame. Whereas what I was doing for a long period of time is I'd be still relapsing. And then I'm like, oh, let's just work on the shame. Let's work on the shame. Let's work on the shame. And then I relapse again. And it's like, oh no, let's work on the shame. Let's work on the shame. But it's like, that's the wrong issue to solve. Like, the issue to solve, if you've got a porn addiction or you're engaging in any behavior that doesn't really align with how you want to behave rationally, the best solution is to deal with the desire. It's not to deal with the shame. You deal with the desire first. And then what happens is the shame's going to go away, because you're going to be in control of yourself, making good decisions moment by moment, over and over and over and over and over, behaving in alignment with your values, with who you want to be. That shame isn't going to keep coming up, because you're no longer doing the shit that causes you shame. Like, it's honestly, in my opinion, it's that simple. The next thing to say, I suppose, would be understanding that there's different parts in your mind. Like, I love this about the Beyond Compulsion method, but what we do is we train people to see that there's 3 different parts in their minds. You have the child self, you have the rational part of the mind, you have the addictive part of the mind. And so when I'm working with a client and they tell me about some ways in which they've behaved in the past, maybe they've gone and had sex with like a sex worker, maybe they've gone and engaged in a behavior that just does not align with their sexual tastes at all. Maybe they've looked at some porn which they just feel is really, really wrong. Maybe they've paid thousands and thousands for, escorts, or they've, had someone like they've been engaged in like findom, femdom, maybe like sissy hypno, like all these different things. They've had sex with like someone who's trans, like on like Grindr. Like I've heard like everything there is to hear, basically. I've heard way worse than what I've just said as well. Someone's been doing all of that stuff, and they're talking to me and they're sharing it. I'm not in my head thinking, oh, this person's so wrong, their sexual desires are out of whack, oh wow. Like, I'm not there judging them at all. I'm just listening to them and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, the addictive part of the mind's really worked on you. Like, the addictive part of your mind has got you to do these things. And look, that's okay, because I understand that at that moment in time, that person wasn't putting the rational part of their mind in charge. Like, those decisions were irrational. They were driven by this part of their mind, the addictive part of the mind, that just wants one thing. And the one thing it wants is to engage in compulsive behavior. And that person's been wired in that way, usually from a young age. Usually it is from like 11 or 12, sometimes younger, where they've got themselves involved in this psychological sort of emotional, dependency on this mind, mood-altering experience, where their brain's being wired to want to engage in compulsive behavior. And I don't see that as that person's fault. It's almost like they're a victim of the world, the society that they've been brought up in, and the over-sexualized world in particular, right? So what I see is someone whose compulsive behavior has escalated to the point where they're quite deep in that addiction, just like someone who's got addicted to heroin, alcohol, weed, whatever it is, right? To me, I just see addiction, right? I don't even see it as like a sexual problem. Like, honestly, I think when you really, really get this problem and you understand compulsive desire and this component of the mind called the addictive part of the mind, and you've been applying the rational part of the mind in the moments of compulsive desire repeatedly over and over and over, you really see that this problem isn't even that much to do with like sex and sexual desire, and that a lot of the thoughts around it being to do with sex just convolute it, which is an attempt by the addictive part of the mind to keep people stuck. And that's really getting a bit deep into the beyond compulsion method there, so don't worry if that doesn't make sense at this point. But I speak to clients and I'm just like, yeah, well, your behavior's escalated. And I get it as well, because my behavior did once upon a time, back when I was in the porn addiction. So I really, really get that. And, I kind of look back on myself and I'm like, damn, like, no wonder you ended up looking at that stuff. Like, of course you ended up escalating your porn use. It's like the addictive part of the mind was fully in control back then. And I had no idea how to deal with that part of my mind. So I'm quite like compassionate with that, with myself in a way, but I'm not compassionate with the addictive part of the mind. That's the thing, is I'm like, wait, the addictive part of the mind's got to be dealt with like very, very assertively. But I'm just kind of like, okay, I get why I'd end up in that position. And that's another reason why the shame's gone, I suppose, is that it's just been, one, so much time has passed now since I've engaged in compulsive behavior. And two, I think I just really get that there's these different parts in the mind and they have different objectives, and that's cool. But the issue is, how do you get the rational mind to make the decisions? And that's why I use a script, like literally a 5-fact script, so that in those moments of compulsive desire, if the addictive part of the mind's getting loud and it's saying all this bullshit, I want a way to put the rational mind back in control. If you want to look at the neuroscience, I'm basically re-engaging the rational part of my mind, so like the prefrontal cortex. I just want to activate that part of my mind again so I can make a good call and then move on. And that's what we do within the Beyond Compulsion Academy. Hopefully that makes some sense. I think if you take one thing away from this video or this podcast, what I would want it to be is to work on dealing with the addictive part of the mind first, and naturally through that repetition of dealing with the desires in a rational way, that shame's really going to start to go, especially if you understand that this problem is one of addiction and not to do with who you are, not to do with sexual desires. So hopefully that can help you out a little bit. If you would like to learn more about the Beyond Compulsion method and learning a script so you can put the rational mind in charge every single time you have an urge, feel free to book in a one-on-one discovery call with myself. I'll leave a link below. Cheers for listening, and we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.